Okay, let's start this webinar on complex PCI with uh, some cases on CTO. I welcome all of you to this wonderful session, which for the next 2 hours we'll be seeing some lovely cases from our esteemed panel of presenters who are all experienced interventional cardiologists from all over the country. So without much ado, let me start off with our first presenter, Dr. Ratish Kumar J. Dr. Ratish Kumar is actually one of our interventional cardiologists who has been a pioneer of coronary imaging in the Eastern India. He is from Command Hospital in Calcutta, and he has been involved with this coronary imaging with his interventions in most of the cases I have heard. So let's hear from Dr. Ratish Kumar about your case of a left main bifurcation with imaging. So you can start off, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you, sir. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can actually, Dr.
Okay, okay. Can see the PPT?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for the kind introduction. And we are doing imaging in not all cases, but yes, those cases which are a little complex. And we have got the latest the angio core registration. So we are trying to do in all complex cases. Simple cases, we don't do it. So just started recently only in majority of cases. Otherwise, we're doing before coming here. We're doing in Bangalore along with Professor Chadda, who is very senior interventional cardiologist, and he's been associated with OCT most of the time. So I was working with him. So after coming here, we have started doing here also, and we have got a new machine now. So hopefully, we are going to do in more and more cases. With this, I must apologize that this is not a CTO, even though I think the seminar, this webinar is on CTO, but this is just a bifurcation, and that too is not a very, it's in fact a semi-bifurcation only, because the one stenting was done some time back. So without wasting much time, I'll just go to the case. So this was a 65-year-old lady. She was a diabetic, hypertensive, and dyslipidemic. She presented to some hospital outside with features of anterior wall MI and cardiogenic shock with a poor LV function. And the details are not available. She underwent a primary angioplasty and she had some CDs with her. So from the CD, we could make out that it was a left main bifurcation involving the distal left main, LAD, and LCA ostium. And rightly, it's been in an emergency, it has been stented from the left main to LAD crossover. There was pinching of the LCA ostium, and we could see that the IABP was also placed, so suggesting that patient was in hemodynamic compromise. So rightly at that time, that was the best strategy. And after that, she was doing fine for the next about 3 years. And then we presented to us, then she presented to us with worsening angina of NYHA class 2 to 3, which worsened over the last 1 month, and she was not responding to the maximum medical therapy. And she started having rest pain for the past 15 days. And then we were forced to take her for a check angio. And we could see that the left main to LAD stent was patent, maybe minor ASR was there, but LCS ostium was very tight, it was just hanging. And it was, even though it was non-dominant, we could see that it is supplying a significant area of the myocardium. And RCA was fine. So now we have a dilemma, what to do next. We already have a stent in the left main to LAD, and now we have a LCS osteal disease, it's about 95%. And there's no, I mean, we can't just leave her on medicines because she has features of unstable angina. So we have to do some intervention, what to do, whether to go for stenting or whether to go for a surgery. Now for just a non-dominant LCX osteal disease, going for surgery is a little too aggressive. And anyway, the patient was not willing, so that question was out. So we have to go for a intervention. Now, how to do, what are the complications? We can compromise the LAD because there is already a LAD, left main to LAD stent. It must have been already been endothelialized. So how to go about? Now we know in a bifurcation, we all know the preferred approach is the provisional provisional stenting. And in this case, we will come to it, why we went for this stenting in this approach. This is the general approach. We know every time we always go for a provisional stenting, we don't want to, so which was rightly done in our case. Initially, they did only a provisional left main to LAD, and that time LCX was not having any problem. Next 3 years, she was fine. But then since she started having symptoms and it is causing critical disease, now we are forced to do a second stent now. So here we are the provisional sideways stenting. Now we have the patient has side branches more than 75% and patient has ischemia. So there is an indication for stenting. So what type of stenting and all, we will come to it. Either we use a TAP or a Kilot or T stenting, depending on the crossing profile and the angle profile. So now since it's a complex disease, and whether we should stent or just put a DEB there. Now, DEB was out because we already know that the LCS osteum is likely to be fibrotic, and if you use a DEB, in a fibrotic area, it is unlikely to deliver much of the drug because no healthy endothelium will be there, and we may not be able to inflate the DEB to that high pressure which requires dilatation. And normally the DEB balloons are semi-compliant balloons, so that nominal pressure is about 8 to 10 or so, not high pressure. So that question was out, and we may not be able to maintain that patency. It is likely to collapse. So we had to go for a stent. Now, whether we should go for a single stent or a 2-stent strategy. Now, we already have a stent in the left main to LAD, and we don't know how the stent is and how much is the ISR, how much is the LAD osteum, left main, how is it. So we don't know all this. So we need some more information, so which is not very evident from the angiography. So we need to go for imaging, which we have done in our case. I'll show in the next slide. And then which technique to be used, whether to use TAP, whether to use reverse crush, Kilot, so which technique to be used. So we need more information regarding this case. So this was the pre-intervention run from the LAD to the left main. So we can see here, we cannot see the stent starts because it's already endothelialized. So we can see here, the some amount of ISR there, but not very critical. Here, the osteum of the LAD and the left main, you can see that thrombus, which is suggestive of the acute coronary syndrome. And the left main parameters are also acceptable. It's about the ear, only the diameters are shown. The area is acceptable. It's about more than 6 millimeters square. So thereby we know that the LAD is fine. The LAD, some amount of ISR is there, but it is acceptable, and the left main is also fine. So we don't need to intervene the left main and LAD now. So we just need to go for a LCX stenting. So as we know that provisional stenting is the approach. Here we have already availed that thing in the first instance. Now we have to use a second stent. Now what are the different techniques which are available? Kilot, the ideal is when both branches are equal size and the angle is narrow, less than 70 degree. Advantage that the bifurcation anatomy is maintained. But problem is, yes, it is time consuming. There are double layer in the proximal aspect, and so we have to cross the main branch. The second is the decay crush, especially in case of narrow angles. So we can maintain the side branch access because of the double kiss, but it is labor intensive, hardware intensive, and more time consuming. And TAP or T stenting, in our case TAP, it is more suitable for wide bifurcation angle, especially left main bifurcations, which are most of the time they are wide bifurcation angle. The advantage is they are very quicker, simpler, and you can do it very fast, and you don't need too much of expertise, yes, except few steps which we need to take care of. The only problem is little bit neocarina, which is a single layer neocarina. It is there, but that is unlikely to cause much of a problem. So we adopted this technique. The least amount of metal bifurcation, and it ensures a full coverage of the osteum, unlike a normal T stenting. So we can see from here that the different modalities, T stenting has the least metal at this thing, but you may miss the osteum sometimes. So that we cannot, accept in this case. So internal crush has got almost 3 layers, not very good because of the layer thing, and it is also a little labor intensive. Crush, recross, all those things are there. And regarding the Kilot, we know again there's a double layer of stenting in the proximal aspect, and the tab we have the minimum stent at the ostium of the side branch. And in this case, tab we selected because the angle we could see is almost 90, I mean almost 80 degree, 85 degree. And we already have a stent in the left main LED, so we don't need another stent now. And this is ideal for a tab in this case. So we took her up for this stenting. So we wired both the branches. The LCX ostium wiring was a little difficult, but the Fielder FC went in without much of a problem. But we didn't know, it was just a narrow passage and we didn't know where we are crossing, whether proximal or distal. We just crossed it. And luckily we could dilate with a 2x10 followed by 2.5 to 15 millimeter balloon. And we dilated, and then we could pass a stent across it, across the stent, left main LED stent. And the most important aspect of the stenting here is the positioning of the stent. The proximal stent should be coinciding with the proximal ostial branch, ostium of the LCX ostium. So this is the proximal ostium, and so the proximal stent should be here. And about 2 to 3 struts can be just coming to the main vessel, where you have already kept a non-compliant balloon for final kissing balloon inflation. So that is the most important aspect. You can see the proximal strut should be just at the proximal end of the ostium, and 2-3 struts of the proximal, that can be coming to the left main in the distal area. So this is what, while you inflate it, this 2-3 struts will come to the main vessel, and this will be just at the ostium of the side branch. So LCX was standard with the 2.75 to 15 tests, and the 3 into 8 millimeter balloon was kept in the left main LED, and only small part was protruding it, and that is the most important aspect in doing a tap. And then just pulled back a little bit and inflated, and then final kissing balloon was kept just a small amount of protrusion to the main vessel. Both the proximal ends were at the carina, just at the carina, and we inflated the final kissing balloon. The most important aspect here is that we should inflate the side branch first and then the main branch, and while deflating, we should deflate it simultaneously. If by chance, if you deflate the side branch first, then the main branch, the main branch balloon will crush the stent struts towards the side branch, thereby negating the effect of the tap. So that's very important. Inflation first is the side branch, then the main branch, and deflation simultaneous most of the time. And we should not deflate the side branch first in any case. So this was the result, angiographic result after the stenting. This is the result, but we did imaging from the LCX to the left main to know. Unfortunately, that video is not available, but this picture showed that there is a dissection at the distal end of the stent, which was not clearly visible in this angio. So this is one thing which we got from the image. So we had to put another stent here in the distal, the distal stent in the LCX. So we put another stent, and then the result is fine. Now we did a check angio after putting the stent from LCX to the left main. We could see the well expanded stents, both the stents, and the LCX ostium got some amount of under expansion, but we didn't want to inflate it very high pressure because we don't want to damage the main vessel stent. So this was acceptable area, and there was some amount of protrusion into the LED. That is it, and otherwise the ostium was open, and no other dissection and other complications were seen. And this was the pullback from the the LED to left main. So we wanted to see how much of the the LCX was protruding to the left main. So you can see this is the side branch. Only 2-3 struts of the LCX was protruding, so which is acceptable. In fact, it is just 0.7 millimeter of the LCX stent was protruding into the LED, indicating this was a very small neocarina. So it is very acceptable. It is an ideal result as far as the tap is concerned. Too much of the metal coming to the left main to LED lumen will cause problem, stent thrombosis and other things. So there was minimal protrusion into the left main. So what was not done in our case, because the left main was very short and already we had a well expanded, well endothelialized stent. So the requirement of port was not really indicated in this case. But in case if you have to go for it, we have to be very careful, and you should position the balloon away from the polygon of confluence. So to conclude, it is very important. Why should we know about this TAP technique? Because it is most of the time we can use it as a bailout technique in any kind of bifurcations, especially the left main bifurcation. We can always do it very rapidly. It is not very labor intensive, and you don't need too much of expertise in that. You don't need too much of hardware. So it is, any commoners can do it if you have done few cases. That is the advantage, and it ensures a complete coverage of the side branch ostium. Only single layer of stent struts at the neocarina, and it is less hardware intensive and technically simpler. The problem, yes, we have to be careful about the positioning of the stents. That is the most important thing. And we should inflate the side branch, the stent balloon first, and then deflate simultaneously during the kissing balloon dilatation. And port ideally is to be done if the left main has adequate length, and if you have taken the balloons a little longer size in the kissing balloon, then we have to definitely do a port. Port is ideal in all cases, but in this case, it was already it was a short left main, and also it was already well endothelialized stent was there, so we didn't want to injure the endothelium further because it was well expanded stent already there in the left main proximal area. So we know in our case how the coronary imaging helped us. In our case, we could see, yes, this was a ACS. There was some thrombus in the left main and the LAD ostium. And then we knew that we don't need a second stent because LAD stent and the left main stent were fine. The area was fine. So we didn't need another stent. And it helped in assessing the stent size, placement, etc. In the LCX. And also helped in detecting the edge dissection in the LCX, which was not detectable on the angiography. Then stent optimization also helped. So here the wire crossing, in fact, in bifurcations, it also helps in wire crossing, we cross the distally or proximally, which is very important as far as the optimal outcome is concerned. In this case, wire crossing thing was not important because we didn't have much space to cross because it was an old stent, and so we didn't have too much of availability of lumen. So wherever the wire went, we just crossed it there. But otherwise, if you're doing a fresh bifurcation, so definitely it helps in knowing where we have gone, the distal struts or the proximal struts. So it definitely helps. And also the imaging helps in finding out whether we require a bifurcation protection or bifurcation stenting or not. Like if the angle is less than 50 degree on an OCT in the longitudinal profile, if the angle is less than 50, yes, likely more chances of side branch compromise. Also, if the branching point to the cranial length, if it is less than 1.7, the chances of, there are various parameters are there. So all these parameters can be used to assess where we really need a bifurcation stenting to begin with or not. So there are various parameters which are available while crossing. Then other features of OCT, like for a standard OCT, whether the complications, the reference vessel dimensions, complications, post-stenting, optimization, all this thing can be done in a bifurcation stenting because anyway, bifurcation is a complex PCI. So all the complex cases, we need many parameters and the chances of complications are more. So we need to have the maximum optimization of our stents without any complications. So that is why we have to go for imaging in all cases of bifurcation preferably. And except in left main osteal disease, where probably IVUS will have an upper hand because of the osteal involvement. Rest of the all cases, OCT definitely has an advantage in this of its better resolution and a lot of other parameters like crossing, distal crossing, proximal crossing, all these things can be better visualized from OCT. So OCT definitely has a role in all the bifurcations, except maybe osteal left main involvement. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ratish Kumar, for your excellent case. What we will do, Dr. Ratish, that we will go on to the next case of Dr. Tejas Pandya, and then we will take a break for the discussion of both the cases, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Dr. Pandya, are you ready with your case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So our next presenter is going to be Dr. Tejesh Pandya, who is a senior consultant interventional cardiologist at Synergy Super Specialty Hospital, Rajkot. And he is going to discuss about an interesting complex coronary case presentation. So over to you, Dr. Pandya, for your case.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good evening. First of all, good evening to all of the panelists and participants. And thank you very much, Dr. Vinayak Deb, sir, for your kind introduction. Actually, I am presenting two cases which are having similar type of the lesions, but different presentation and a different scenario. So just I will share my slide. Is it visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, sir. So my first case is having, she's a 63-year-old lady.
You need to actually put on your
We are
PowerPoint,
angina, which
Dr.
was,
Pandya. We can't see the PowerPoint. I can see your computer.
your screen is sharing.
I think you need to tap onto that PowerPoint presentation of yours.
Just a minute, sir. Now it is visible?
We can see the computer of yours and the presentation, but not the PowerPoint yet.
Okay, sir, once a minute.
Can you please double click on your presentations? Can you please?
Just double click on the presentation.
Just a minute, sir. I will make a slide. So, is it visible, sir?
Not yet.
Prasanjit, sir, could you help karo?
Prasanjit,
Yes, yes.
Dr. Pandya, can you double click that?
If you can take the presenter right and again give the presenter.
Sir, now please share screen.
Okay. Share screen, I'm going, sir.
Yeah. Double click it.
It has come, sir?
Not yet.
Sir, you first open the PPT.
Sir, can
Then
you
you share the
first
screen.
open the PPT and then start sharing. First open the PPT, sir.
First open the PPT.
Okay, sir, I opened it.
Now you share screen and share the PPT. Then it will be visible.
It is coming, sir?
No, we can't see it actually.
So in your laptop, your PPT is open, sir?
Yes, sir, it is open. Yeah.
Okay. Again, if you can do, sir, stop presenting, just open the presentation, and when you share, click on the presentation itself, sir.
Okay, so first I have to do stop sharing.
Stop sharing, then
Okay.
open the PPT.
You open the
In
PPT
your laptop,
completely.
you
Yeah.
can open
Yes, sir.
the
Open it up.
PPT,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now you can share that PPT itself, sir. Only PPT.
Okay, sir, how to do this sharing?
First, click on share screen,
Yes.
then select the PPT.
Okay.
Not like that.
Again,
In share screen option, first click on share screen, then there is a dialog box, selected box, your screen, presentation. Click on share screen.
It has
Yeah,
come,
we
sir?
can see it
Yes,
now.
it is
Yeah,
visible.
just
Now
enlarge
we
it
can
now.
see. Now we can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry
Put
to
on
interrupt.
presentation mode, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Now we can see. Now you can go ahead.
That's
Yes,
perfect
yes,
now.
yes.
That's
Okay.
perfect, Dr. Pandya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for
Carry on.
inconvenience.
Not at all. Just carry on, please. Yeah.
Okay. So my first case history, she was a 63-year-old lady and she has progression with the existential angina since last 6 months. And it is gradually increasing in last 1 to 2 months. She is a known case of hypertension, but not a diabetic. and she has a past history of carcinoma breast 11 years back, and for that she was operated, and she has taken full cycles of chemotherapy and radiotherapy. ECG was normal, and echo was also normal ejection fraction. So she was taken for angiograph. So as we can see, this angiogram is showing a left dominant system with large ramus, and ostial LAD is having significant 95 to 99% highly calcific lesion, which is extending up to the mid LAD, which we can see in the cranial view, and also having TIMI-2 flow. So now, what are the options we have? Either we send for CABG, or we have to take for a rotablation. So first of all, she denied it because she already underwent some surgery in the past, and she didn't have courage to go to the CABG. So we left with only one option, that is a rotablation in the LAD. So which are the anticipated difficulty? We know that she is having a left dominant system. RCA was almost like non-existent, and it was a large ramus and highly calcific lesion. So we took for the rotablation, and we have started with femoral route. Guide we have taken is JL7F, and this is the first with the help of microcatheter. We have passed the initial Renato wire, and then exchange with the rota wire. And we have taken 1.5 mm bore, and we did 3 rounds of rotablation. First was 1,65,000 RPM for 15 to 20 seconds. Second is 1,55,000, and third one was 1,50,000 for 15 seconds. We have kept TPA as a backup. It was not in the RV, but we have kept outside if we are needed. So 3 cycles of rota done, and this is the images post rotablation. So that is reasonably good flow. That TIMI-2 flow is almost increased, and lumen has also somewhat opened up. So now plan was to do further pre-dilatation with the help of 2.5 and 3 mm NC balloon gradually. But this time a patient has femoral local site hematoma, and patient went into the vasovagal shock. So she was almost arrested on table. We have to give atropine, adrenaline, terminaline, and she was given CPR for 10 minutes. So initially we thought that, oh my God, we are gone. I think we thought that initially it may be the LMC dissection. So immediately we put the wire in the circ, and we can see there is so much tachycardia. LV was almost like stunned. So we didn't have that much time to do pre-dilatation. We directly have to secure the branch first. So we took the 3.5 into 3 into 32 mm stent, and we have deployed. So this is the immediately post deployment of the stent. So now she was okay, but she required inotropic support. Then we did post dilatation with 3.5 mm balloon, 3.5 into 12 mm NC balloon till 12 to 22 mm. So this is the final shoot. So luckily during this chaos also we can actually land the stent at the required place. So, and the good thing is the large ramus and the circumflex has not been affected, means pinched so much. And this is our final cranial images. So we can see that all branches are open, even diagonal and septal having good blushes. And patient was put on the NORAD support, and she was shifted to ICU. Gradually, she has been stabilized and inotrope tapered off. And luckily, we got to discharge on third day. She came to follow up again after 10 days, 1 month, and 3 months, and she is doing fine. So luckily, she is stable now. Second case I would like to share is the almost similar type of lesion, but their presentation is different. The patient was 62-year male. He is having angina since last 7 days, and SCS and STEMI because troponin was positive. No history of DM hypertension, but patient was smoker. His EF was around 45%, mild LV dysfunction, and he is taken for CAG. So we can see almost a similar type of lesion here also. Osteoproximal LAD is having 99% critical lesion. But here the advantage is circumflex is co-dominant, and RCA we are having some support. So here we have time because patient was almost pain free. So we took radial approach, 6A for sheath, GL guide. Here also we have anticipated difficulty because LMC was very short and there is large ramus and almost there is no place to land in the LED ostium. But the good thing is the LCX is codominant, RC is codominant, so we could have support. And we thought that LMC is short, so here we can use the help of in-house imaging. We have IVAS in our lab, so we can use IVAS and we could place stent from left main itself to the LED. So initially we passed the wire, one wire was kept in the ramus, regular Renato wire. We did the pre-dilatation with 2 into 10 mm SC balloon from 10 to 12 mm. And this is the IVAS balloon, IVAS catheter. And we did IVAS and we can see that LED was around 3.8 mm. This is the IVAS. I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have IVAS run, but I have that freeze images. So LED pre was around 3.70 as we can see, and LMC was around 5 mm. So we go ahead with the stent. We put 3.5 into 38 mm chance expedition, and we dilated with 12 atmosphere. Then we did ostial flaring with the same stent balloon with up to 18 atmosphere. And then we did post dilatation. We know that LED distal was around 3.8. So we directly took 4 mm NC balloon, 4 into 12 mm. And we did post dilatation up to 12 to 14 mm. And this is the post IVAS shoot. So we can see that proximal and mid LED stent is well opposed. And we did LM also. So this we can see that LM is around 5 mm vessel, large stud. So we did a post port in the LM, 5 into 8 mm NC balloon till 12 to 14 atmosphere. So this was the last cranial images final shoot, and this is the caudal imaging. So thank you. Here also I would like to share this experience that as Dr. Ratish has been perfectly said, that if you have the in-house facility of the IVAS is available, it will make your life very easy. And here in case like initially if we see by naked eyeballing, then we will understand that LMC is around 4 or 4.5. But when we do IVAS study, we got to know that LM is actually 5 mm vessel. So we could do port with 5 mm balloon, and ultimate result is good. So for long-term stent properties and to avoid complications, IVAS imaging or OCT imaging, any imaging in the left main cases is very much useful. So thank you very much. This is my cases.
Thank you, Dr. Pandya, for two excellent cases. I would ask our panelist now, Dr. Nadeem Afroz, to kindly start the discussion, and then I can invite actually all our speakers even to join in if they have any questions. So let us give this actually a very open type discussion. So first,
Yes,
Dr. Nadeem.
It's a wonderful presentation from our two great cases. One of the difficult cases being managed in a most efficient manner. And it is very important nowadays that we have taken the help of imaging, and imaging is
So
basically
Nadeem, we can't hear you properly.
Can take out the mask, probably.
mask. I'm in hospital. Huh? So, well, thanks to the basically good, excellent presentations, and imaging is one of the essential elements in our day-to-day clinical cases, and to deal with all these calcified lesions and basically bifurcation lesions. Imaging makes the life much easier than eyeballing. The only thing is that I would like to ask the first Dr. Basically Tejas.
The audio is not very clear, Dr. Nadeem.
Now it is clear.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically imaging, the role of imaging, as we all have come across in our cath lab practices, that it has increased and is day by day increasing, and IVAS and OCT is an excellent tool, and we are making the cases and to decrease the risk of complications, to know in-hand complications, to decrease the risk of any stenosis. All these are basically reduced to minimal with the help of these tools. Now, why was the patient? There is one interesting, basically, what Dr. Tejas has presented, that what was basically, why did the patient went into suddenly into vasovagal, and we could not find any
Dr.
disease
Ratish, can you hear him?
There was basically, it was a femoral
I
basically
can
puncture.
hear.
Okay.
I can hear him.
What was the reason? So that is a very interesting point. And we also come across these female sort of patients when we do femoral puncture. Then these are the complications which we see. Suddenly there are vasovagal or some complication we never come across. Patient develops sudden shock, and then we give some ad and inotropic support, and then patient improves. But few cases we have never even know that what went wrong during a procedure, whether it was procedure induced or whether it was vasovagal.
Yeah, sir. That because she is having a large femoral hematoma, and that we came to know that because for that hematoma she went into the vasovagal. She was a very sensitive lady and obese lady, so obviously puncture was on a little bit higher side. But we took a check shoot also after completing the procedure, so it didn't have any perforation or any posterior leak. But because of hematoma, she went into vasovagal. That is we thought. Because initially we thought that I think it was LMC get dissected because she is having sudden bradycardia, hypotension, and immediately she rested on table. So first I think what we want to secure the vessel, then we check out what is the probable cause. Then we come to know that she is having a large femoral hematoma.
Yeah, so it was basically very well managed, and it is very important, and it gives us a lesson that we should generally find out the cause. So in that case,
Yes,
it was
sir.
local hematoma, and it was very well taken care by. But behind the mind, we should always keep in that we have done certain basically left main dissection, so it was excluded, and that was a wonderful job, and the things were controlled, and the result was excellent.
Yeah, thank
And
you,
the
sir.
STAP technique, what Dr. Rakesh has, it was a very good presentation, and IAVAS guided, imaging guided, we just shown that minimal tap to decrease the risk of restenosis in future. That was a wonderful presentation. So thank you very much. Now I'll ask Dr. Vinayak to share his thoughts on these two cases.
Dr. Vinayak sir.
Yeah, actually, I can't hear Dr. Nadeem very well, but I have a question for Dr. Pandya.
Yes.
Let us start with you. Why did you choose to do a rota ablation for the first case immediately without actually pre-dilating?
Yes, sir. Actually, it was a very tight lesion, and picture is already having LED TIMI2 flow. So once we cross the initial wire, and then we, with the help of microcatheter, we have changed with the rota wire. So initially we thought that we could do, but we know that already there was in the TIMI2 flow, and I think she was having some onset of chest pain. So we thought that initially first we'll open up the vessels, and then we will do. Otherwise, initial plan was to put second wire in LCX, one wire in LED, and the pre-dilatation with the 1.5 or 2 mm balloon, and then we'll do rota. But as soon as it was the very slit-like opening, so as soon as the microcatheter went inside, she was having chest pain, and ECG changes suggestive of ischemia. So we thought that we will go ahead with the rota.
I was just wondering that how did you actually assess the amount of calcium which you had in that lesion before doing a rota? Because the rota ablation procedure takes a little bit of time and effort, because that causes a lot more ischemia. I was just wondering, why didn't you just balloon it first, give it a breather, and then perform the rest of the procedure? Would that have been a better option in that particular case?
Yes, sir, you are right. I think initial my thought was like that only. We'll do one balloon, and then we can have some time. But actually, she is having chest pain, so we thought that we'll go ahead with the procedure.
Okay.
What was the ejection fraction in that case, sir? The first case?
It was normal, sir.
It was normal. Yeah. It was normal ejection fraction. I think it was very well managed in the end. Did you go up to the left main in that case?
No,
with
sir.
your stent?
No, sir. We put on the posterior LED only. So initially in all this chaos, we thought that we may miss and it may end up doing the LMC, because initially we thought that it is LMC dissection. So we thought that first we'll put the distal stent, and then if needed second stent, we can put LM to LED. But after putting LED stent, she was stabilized, the BP was also okay, and we can see in the images that LM is okay. So we go ahead with posterior LED placement only.
I think my co-speakers and our panel might agree that in this particular case, you probably would want to do a follow-up angiogram with a IVUS study,
Yes, sir.
to
Sure.
exactly see what you have done. Because I think you have saved her life on that table. But now going ahead, what would be the long-term implications of this case? It would be better if you do a check angiogram with a IVUS guided angio. What do you think, Dr. Ratish?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. We need to know how much, what is the expansion, and whether we have missed the ostium or things. Definitely, we need either OCT or an IVUS is mandatory for the long-term prognosis, because it's likely to be a very vital vessel, because patient had ischemia during the procedure, and we don't want to leave something, some abnormality.
But I think you did a very, very good job on that case,
Saving the patient
Dr.
definitely
Pandya.
is a wonderful
Yeah,
job.
because I think somebody with a cardiac arrest situation being resuscitated and putting a stent there and coming out, I think it's an excellent case which you have done, and thank God, the patient is doing well. In the second case, you had a similar case, and I think the importance of imaging is so important when you're doing an osteal case, particularly a LAD, which is so important, the artery. And as we know that you always underestimate from angiogram the size of the diameter of the vessel. So probably that case was done much, much better because you had probably more time, and the vessel adjacent to it was a codominant LCX and a circ and RCA. So basically, I think you had more time to deal with that case.
Yes, sir. That's why I presented these two cases, that if we have time and we have imaging house, in our specialty, then we can definitely do better scenario, the better presentation.
So let us go to Dr. Ratish for your case, sir. You mentioned that the primary PCI was done 3 years ago on that particular case. So this is a kind of a unique case, because I think you have the opportunity of seeing this endothelialized stent and in the left vein and the LAD, which we don't get to see that often. And you mentioned that you did not have much disease in the circ ostium when they did that case.
Yeah, it was there, but probably they just managed, because it was a life-saving situation. They managed the left vein to LAD stenting and came out, and nothing was, the LCS ostium was not addressed at that time, and probably they didn't report, or we don't know. But she was not symptomatic, so that is a provisional stenting is probably acceptable, because LCS ostium is notorious. Whatever you do with it, ultimately it's going to restenosis, likely. Whatever you do, even if you stent it, it's likely to restenosis. So that is.
I think, as you rightly mentioned, Dr. Ratish, that CABG was never an option here, because it was just a LCX you are dealing with. I mean, so CABG could not have been an option. So you are left with
non-dominant. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you with the tap technique, because the T stenting, you have a very good chance of missing the ostium of the LCX. So a tap technique is definitely on. I was wondering, you mentioned some thrombus in that lesion. So did you do ad hoc plasty on this case, or was it a planned case which you did?
It was planned, means the patient came with chest pain, in the sense she had features of unstable angina, because she had chronic stable angina for last 1 year, which was worsening over 1 week, 1 month or so. And then last 15 days, she had rest pain off and on. So suggesting that the lesion is getting more tighter, or maybe a fresh thing developing. Even though the trope was negative, so but still she had features of the thrombus. So probably it is a ACS setting. It didn't completely make an infarct, but it was.
So did you do any thrombectomy or any kind of?
No, we used GP2B3A in this case. And the check angio after that and check OCT revealed absence of any thrombus there.
The other interesting thing which you mentioned, of course, was the stent edge dissection.
Yes,
I wanted to ask you, did you see it angiographically, or was it only picked up by the OCT? Well, this is a very important part.
Yeah, it was not picked up angiographically. It was looking little some mismatch, so we would have left it. If you're just doing angiography, sometimes we feel that the stent is a little, the step up is there, we don't normally address it. If the flow is good, and if we normally, but when you did the OCT, we could see that it is almost a medial dissection, and it is more than 60 degrees. So it was a significant dissection. So if we had left it, probably a distal edge dissection, could have led to a stent thrombosis and other things, other complications. So
So
that is
if you
one
had
thing
to
which
score it by OCT, what kind of score would you give for the dissection? I mean, was it a 0 to 90 or 90 to 180? How much would you give it?
So it was, I didn't get that, sir. What is that?
If you had to score the dissection, I mean, how much would that dissection would be in the OCT scale?
It was almost 180 degree. It was going into almost 180 angle.
So I
Almost
think for the
into that
viewers,
angle,
I think this is a very important lesson, isn't it, Dr. Ratish, that when you are doing a stenting, to see the stent edge is so very important, because that would be one of the areas where you can have a restenosis or a new lesion coming up in the next 2 to 3 years if you didn't do a OCT
Yes.
in this particular case. And if you could tell the viewers exactly in what kind of cases would you leave a dissection alone based on the OCT?
In case like proximal dissections, we can still leave if it is because it's unlikely to progress.
Yeah.
Distal dissections, yes. And if the angle between the dissected flap and the lumen is more than 60 degree, like more perpendicular dissections, they can cause problem. And dissections which are going to the media, that we can from the just the small intimal tear may not be that significant, but if it is going a little deeper into the media, so it is significant. And if it is going into more than one quadrant or going to 180 degree or so, that is more significant. So just a few flaps in the edge may not be that significant. So angle more than 60 degree between the dissected flap and the lumen, and any medial dissection or extending beyond that definitely is an indication as far as OCT is concerned for intervention. And distal edge dissections, proximal dissections are not very significant because they are unlikely to progress. You have to optimize the stent and that's it. And I think it will flap will close, unless it is a left main or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you mentioned that point about the tap stenting very well, that, while doing the post kissing dilatations, that going by the side branch first and then going to the main branch and then deflating it together, that's the most important bit to remember in that tap procedure.
Yes.
And the advantage, of course, is the single layer of stent which you have in the carina.
Yes.
So that point, I think you mentioned very nicely. What usually we talk about culotte technique in the left mains. I mean, in which scenario, if you tell the viewers, would you talk about a culotte? If you had to go for a double stenting in this case,
culotte is better if the angle is narrow. Like if the left main, that bifurcation, if it is less than 70 degree, when that case, and plus if both the vessels are almost the same size, vessel size has to be almost the same size, because you have to ultimately proximally you have two stents overlapping with each other. So the stent sizing has to be almost the same. So that is why if the angle is narrow, if any angle more than 70 degree and all, the T-tap is a better thing. And culotte will have a little bit problem because you have to go across you have to stent the most angulated branch first, and then you have to cross and go to the main vessel. So that is why culotte, and the only issue is the proximal area will have double layer of stenting. So instead of a long culotte, we can have a mini culotte with minimum overlap. So that can be done. Culotte also can be done, but it's a little more labor intensive than a simple tap stenting. There you have to, in culotte, you have to recross, you have to dilate, and you have to overlap with other stents. So those things are there. Those can be avoided in a tap stenting.
Dr. Nadeem, if you have any questions for Dr. Ratish.
I have a question. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Vineet. I have a question to Dr. Ratish. Did you do a pot after the kissing balloon? The final pot?
No, he didn't.
Final pot was not done. That I mentioned that because we had a very short left main as such. Plus the stent was already expanded. It is a left main stent which is already expanded. So we didn't really. It is not that already the endothelium and all is still there. So we didn't want to damage the endothelium further. And it is not a freshly implanted stent. So it is an expanded stent. It is well in the endothelium. So I mean there was no requirement, I feel, in that case. And it is a short left main as such. And we didn't use that kissing balloon proximally. It was just short, just at the carina only. We kept those balloons. We didn't go beyond the polygon of confluence. So that's why we didn't use it. Yes, ideally, if you are freshly implanting two stents, definitely we should do it. And preferably, we should have at least about 8 millimeter, proximal to the bifurcation, so that 6 to 8 millimeters, so that we have
I think, Dr. Ratish, in this particular case being so unique, it was so important that you did not do the pot because you wouldn't want to disturb the endothelial part of the artery at all.
Yes.
And that was a very good decision which you have taken.
Yes.
I have one point to make. So regarding your question that which dissection we should address in OCT. So whatever sir has told, one thing, anything that is major dissection on OCT, what is defined as a major dissection, it is more than 60 degree and the length is more than 3 millimeters. And when it is more than one quadrant, so that is significant distance and that extending into the media, those dissection we should actually address. Anything less than that, we can leave it as it is.
Dr. Nadeem, if you have any more questions, otherwise we can go on to the next presentation by Dr. Dasgupta. Okay, Dr. Dasgupta, I think you can carry on with your next presentation. I present Dr. Kaushik Dasgupta. He is one of my colleagues who is at NH R.N. Tagore Hospital in Kolkata. And I am aware of his interventional skills as a cardiologist. He's been doing very good work. I'm aware of that. And he's going to present a case of stent failure. So over to you, Dr. Dasgupta.
So audio offer. So
Kaushika can't hear you.
sir, you are muted, sir. Kaushik sir.
Oh, so, am I audible, sir?
Now you're audible, Dr. Dasgupta. Yes,
Am I visible?
Yes, you're visible, and your slides, you can put it on PowerPoint. Now we can see you very well.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, sir. So I'll be talking about a case of stent failure. So my patient, he is a 69 years old male, non-diabetic, normotensive, and non-smoker. He, by profession, he is a radiologist. He is attached to our hospital only, was admitted with chest discomfort since last month or so. So the past history had undergone PTCA to LAD 2006, but we do not have any records of the stent size and diameters and what are the indications. So then his ECG shows it was normal sinus rhythm. There is no significant STD changes. Echo normal, ejection fraction of 56%. Hemoglobin was 14 gram per deciliter and serum creatinine was 1 milligram per deciliter with eGFR of 74.09 and random blood sugar was 86 milligram per deciliter. His troponin I was within normal limit. So we decided we'll go for an angiogram for him to see what is happening, why he's complaining so much of angina. Then we took him for the angiogram. So after his procedure, recently he had undergone, maybe a year back, he had undergone an angiogram through radial route. So there was a radial artery occlusions. So he could not access through radial route. So he went for the right femoral route and his right side was dominant. So, and it was normal. And this is his epicranial view of LAD stent, which shows us in-stent restenosis. And this is eleocaudal view. Now, so our plan was there is an image guided PCI to LAD. We wanted to do on next day, but however, he insisted to do is on ad hoc basis plasty. So we upgraded to the 7 French femoral sheath and we took a guide of 7 French XV 3.5. Then we took a run through intermediate war. As the crossing was not as easy, so we decided before we take a OCT, we actually decided to do a OCT in this particular case over IVAS because we thought he has already a stent. We will be able to see what is happening in the stent. We'll get more information with OCT than IVAS. So we decided to do a OCT. So, so we did a pre-dilatations with a small balloons, 1.5, 15 millimeters traveler balloon at 14 atmosphere to get an optimal OCT image so that we'll be able to interpret more. So meanwhile, so this is his first OCT run. So we followed, it is the now actually MLD max. So we in pre-OCT run, we see the morphology of the plaque, then length of the lesions and the diameter of the vessels. So as the OCT run, we can see the stent start here, and there is a severe new intimal hyperplasia with narrowing of the lumen. So even we can see the areas of calcifications. It is coming now from 2 to 5 o'clock positions, and as we go, these are big diagonal vessels. Then as we go the proximal, so we can see the fibrous plaque all over the LAD artery. And then we, as we're going, we're deciding where actually, so we should land the stent. So here we do not find any EL. We didn't find any EL. What is classically described as a this is a left main, and here we stop. We classically describe as a left rope in the mesh appearance in OCT. So now this is the view we interpreted the image. So this is the MLA was 1.33 millimeter square, and we can see the previous stent start here, and as there is a new intimal hyperplasia with severe narrowing of the luminal area. So in this slide, you can see the areas of calcification that is extending from 2 to 5 o'clock positions. However, this calcium was less than 180 degree. The measurement, I'm not able to show in the slide, it is all 0.5 millimeters, and the length was less than 5 millimeters. So at this point, we decided though maybe the calcium score will be around maximum, should be less than 2. So we decided we should go for a high pressure dilatation with a non-compliant balloon. So this is our angiogram post dilatations, pre-dilatations with a 2.7 millimeter and 12 NC traveler balloon at 18 to 20 atmospheres. We can see the right side of the screen, there is a dog boning effect. At this point of time, we decided we will not be able to get the luminal final luminal area as expected. So we decided we should go for the second step. So with the back of your mind, you have your OCT image which showing a calcium that is less than 180 degree, less than 5 millimeter in length. We thought we'll go either with say cutting balloon or with a scoring balloon. So we both have FlexTherm and OPN in our lab, but we usually prefer to go with a FlexTherm. So then we decided we take a 2.75 into 10 millimeter FlexTherm, and we dilated at 10 atmosphere. And after that, we thought we got a reasonable result angiographically. Now let's see what is happening in the OCT after the FlexTherm. So this is the second run that we took after the OCT coming from the distals. Here you can see the normal vessels. Here we actually, I would like to mention, we do not have in our lab the angio co-registration. So we have to manually calculate the length of the stent. So we can see the areas of fractured calcium there, and the luminal area was better and than the pre-OCT run. So this is the OCT run. So then we decided, as there is a plaque in the proximal LAD, so we'll take a longer stent. So coming to the proximal part. So then this is the post-FlexTherm modifications of the plaque, and we decide usually the stent size depending on the distal diameter. And here we can get not a 360 degree, but still some EL. So we measured it from lumen to lumen in diameter. This is the distal part of the vessel where we thought we'll land. This is a proximal where we thought we'll be able to land the stent. So depending on that, we can if we take the luminal diameter, we can upsize it at 0.25 to the 0.5. But from our IVAS experience, we are predominantly still till that was IVAS operators. So we decided we'll upsize the stent. It will take a 2.75 into 48 millimeter Giants expedition. We deployed the stent at 11 atmosphere. After that, we post-dilated distal part of the stent with a 3 into 12 millimeter non-compliant balloon, and then leaving the distal 5 millimeter of the stentage, and the proximal part with a 3.5 into 12 millimeter at 16 and 18 atmosphere. And this is the final angiogram after post-dilatations. So angiographically, we got a decent result. This is the epicranial, this is the caudal view of the angiogram. We thought we got a good result. Then we did our final OCT run. So coming from distal to the proximal, we see now the max. Max is MLD max. Max is the any medial dissection, the position and expansion of the stent. So we did this case a month back. So that time in our machine, we didn't have the expansion indicator. So we are not able to measure the expansion part of MLD max. So we saw the positions. There was no medial dissections. The position was almost adequate. And so even there's no distal dissection, there's no proximal edge dissections. This is the proximal part of the stent, proximal LAD coming to SARC and left main ostium. So here we stop. So this is our SARC ostium. Now, this is the position indicator. So afterwards, I tried calculating. Recently, it has been developed that expansion indicators, we got around 80%, which is acceptable, but not optimal. Optimum, they say it is more than 90%. So with that, we have done a decent job. So we call it a day. Then, so the conclusions, lesion preparation is utmost important for final optimal results. So imaging helps in decision making during the complex PCI. So as is this case in the OCT. So use of debulking devices helps in getting the optimum MSA. Thank you everyone for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta, for your excellent presentation. And we will get back to you with the questions after we finish with the other speakers. Dr. Matia has got his next presentation. I can't see him. So I think we will ask Dr. Vineet Shankla to start off with his presentation. Dr. Shankla, are you around?
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir.
Yeah, you can hear us. Yeah. So
can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Vineet. So Dr. Vineet Shankla is Senior Consultant Interventional Cardiologist from CIMS Hospital, Ahmedabad. And we have been hearing about your good work, which you have been doing there. So if you can start off with your presentation of a newer techniques to overcome calcified LAD in a high-risk patient, because the calcium business is a very, very difficult issue with interventional cardiologists. So over to you, Dr. Vineet.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind introduction. Can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, we can actually, Dr. Vineet.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So this is about a lady. She's around 78 years old. She's diabetic and a very underweight lady. Weight must be around 35, 40. She presented with acute NSTEMI and she was in pulmonary edema also, almost impending shock. Troponin was positive. Echo showed ejection fraction of 30% with RWMA, and creat was 1.5. Of course, eGFR would have been around 40. She also had undergone an angiography before 5 years ago, and she was advised bypass surgery, but she had deferred. So she was on medical treatment only. And so this was the angiography. The RC shows a CTO starting from proximal. And this was the LAD. It was a heavily calcified bifurcation lesion. So LAD D1, very heavily calcified bifurcation lesion. Ramus had some mild disease here in the distal, mid to distal part. Otherwise, circumflex was free of disease. So we decided to go ahead with intervention. Now, this lady was almost, she was on inotropes, so she was having high creatinine, so contrast load was probably a concern. And plan was to do a LAD D1. Now, she was having very heavily calcified LAD and D1 lesion, which was seen in the fluoroscopy also, this calcium. We had thought of doing a rota, or probably we thought of doing a newer technique called as coronary IVL, intravascular lithotripsy. We, just because of the advantage of avoiding no reflow and other complications of rotablation, we thought we'll go ahead with this case with the IVL. So she had a little medical stabilization, and we took her for procedure. Now, even on the plan was to do a LED T1 bifurcation initially, but on table her blood pressure was almost in the range of 90s, and IBP was also standby. And this was the lesion while we took her for, this was the angio while we took her for angioplasty. So we wired the LED. Wiring was not very difficult. We took a run through workhorse wire. We actually, as I told, we were planning for LED D1 bifurcation, but she was not giving much time. She was having hypotension. IBP was also standby. So we thought, okay, fine, let us put one wire and dilate the LED and do a LED PCI. So our plans changed to just do a LED PCI. She was around 78, 79 years old, and we didn't, in the sense, we thought, let us do a LED and then see what happens to D1, because she was quite unstable, as I told. So this was the pre-dilatation done with a 2 NC balloon. And this was after dilatation. Of course, there's always there's a significant diagonal lesion also at the seam. We have not dilated the diagonal. We have in fact not wired the diagonal also. And then we took a IVL, and this is the IVL 3x12. We are the IVL. We have to dilate it at 4 ATM, and we dilated. We gave this pulses almost. We gave around 8 pulses in this LED, starting from distal to proximal. So this is the IVL we are using. And we did a pre-OCT because it was a very heavily calcified, and as I told you, creatinine was also on the higher side. So we did a, after this IVL, we did a one OCT run. And this was the OCT. This was post IVL. Pre-IVL, we did not do a OCT. So this was a, sorry. So you can see there's a lot of, as we go into the mid part, there's a lot of calcium here. There's a chunk of calcium, 6 o'clock. Then there's a calcium here. And what this IVL has done is a lot of fractures it has produced. Can you see this one at the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock position? There's one more here at around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock positions. So these are the fractures caused by, in fact, I'll tell it, there's one more here, if you see here. Sorry. So what I'll tell you, this is actually freckles. Can you see at 4 o'clock position, there are small freckles here. Rather than causing a abrupt disruption of the media, there's a freckles at 4 o'clock position. So this was the OCT run in the post IVL. A lot of calcium is seen. And then we took a 3x48. We dilated with IVL. We gave pulses with a size of IVL 3x12, and then we took the same stent 3x48, the Zions Expedition. And then we post dilated in the mid and the proximal part with 3.5x12 NC Trek. So this is the post dilatation which is done. And this is the final result. Of course, this is not a complete result. I am pretty sure that there will be many questions asked for me for not doing a LED D1 bifurcation. But as I told, this lady was an impending shock, and there were a lot of other concerns also. In fact, we did not do a post IVL, post stenting IVL also because of the hemodynamics and the contrast overload. So this was the final result in the RAO caudal view. Fortunately, this lady made up, and she was discharged in a very stable condition after 2 to 3 days of inotropes and medical therapy optimization. So a little bit of a shockwave coronary IVL therapy. So this is a new modality to treat severely calcified lesions, specifically the lesions which are more deeper, medial calcification. So there is a pulse generator which is battery operated. Then there is a cable, and as you can see, there is a button on the cable where if you press, it will give you the pulses. You can press it again, it will stop the pulses, but at one time it will give around 10 pulses. So there will be 8 cycles of 10 pulses, so it will give around 80 pulses. You can give 8 cycles in one artery. The idea is to use a balloon 1:1 ratio. Like if you are using a stent of, if the artery is 3 millimeter size, you will have to use a 3 millimeter balloon. And this is the balloon. It has 2 emitters which are 6 millimeter in distance, which will emit the acoustic waves. So the mechanism is like that. The electrical energy is converted into a mechanical energy, and it causes rapid expansion of the bubbles inside, which then give acoustic waves, and which then pulverizes the calcium. There's also a proximal and distal balloon marker is also there to know the sizes and everything. But in fact, we have 2 6 mm pulse emitters inside the balloon, and we can take a normal saline. We can take a contrast with a normal saline dilution. What we take a normal contrast when we dilate a normal balloon. Same contrast with saline dilution we can take here. So this is the IVL sizes which are available. It's the lowest size is 2.5 into 12. The length is fixed. It starts from 2.5 into 4. So there's a concern that if the artery size is more than 4, there is no IVL, at least for the coronary available right now. So this is the idea of, this is from the internet. This is not from my patient, but we can see that in the second picture, we can see that the IVL causes, the greatest advantage of IVL is that it causes a very circumferential plaque modification. Unlike rota, which can have probably orbital atherectomy, which can have a wire bias, here there is no wire bias. So the chances of perforation and slow flow, which are not uncommon in rotablation, it's almost nil. In fact, the trial which was done in coronary artery disease, the CAD Disrupt 1 and 2 trial, there was absolutely no incidence of perforations with IVL therapy. And instead of causing great disruption, it causes minor freckles in the media. Can you see the freckles here in the white arrowhead in the 2 o'clock position, 9 o'clock position? Almost 50% will have these freckles, and almost 25% will have multiple freckles. But it'll give you a way to the stent or maybe a post dilatation with a normal NC balloon. So that is the greatest advantage of this is again from the internet. We can see that if you use an orbital atherectomy, the second column, if you use an orbital atherectomy, there is a wire bias, and you can see in the second column, the lower image, the wire bias can cause a preferential ablation in one particular quadrant, and it can cause giveaway, and it can cause perforation. While that is not the case with IVL, it will cause a unfocused circumferential plaque modification with tiny freckles instead of causing great disruption. Like you can see the last picture, that is a post-cutting balloon, which causes a great intimal tears, and that can probably lead. There's a concern which can lead to new intimal proliferation and NIH later after the procedure. So that is the advantage of IVL almost, and it is a very rapid learning curve. It's unlike rotablation where you require a little learning curve. You require a lot of arrangement, a lot of technicalities are there. While this is a very rapid learning curve, it just requires a little bit of balloon. The only thing is that, see, the idea of IVL is that you are just dilating at 4 ATM. You're actually not dilating the lesion. You're just giving acoustic energies, and you're just dilating at 4, give pulses therapy. Then once the pulse therapies are over, you dilate it to 6 ATM and then deflate it. The idea of dilating it from 4 to 6 is just to increase the compliance and to see how the lesion has yielded. So you are not causing any barotrauma because of the balloon. You're just causing the acoustic energies. The same principle is applied in breaking the renal stone. So that is the same principle applied here also. But of course, the balloon is never causing the barotrauma. That is the advantage. This was the Disrupt CAD trial, and it was seen that almost every lesion it was crossed. Maybe you may require a little pre-dilatation, and this is probably a concern because sometimes if a very heavy calcified lesion, the IVL balloon may not pass. So you may require to prepare the bed also. And it is a very, very safe procedure, very safe as compared to root ablation. Very rapid learning curve. You do not require a lot of technicalities to learn this procedure. This dissections, perforations, abrupt closure, slow flow, almost, because there was no distal embolization of small particles like in root ablation. It was just pulverizing the calcium. And it was very effective. In fact, there was fractures seen in 80% of the lesions, reducing diameter stenosis to almost 8%. So this was the Disrupt CAD2 trial. Now, one more, this was actually seen by me. This is our lab. This is just a still picture, but this is our lab monitor. So when we were giving IVL in one patient, I saw some spikes coming on the ECG, and I asked the executive also, the IVL executive, what's happening here? And he was also not aware, but we could see certain spikes whenever the IVL were giving pulses. And then I read about it. And what I found is that these are actually called as shocktopics. And there's a lot of literature about it, that when you give pulses, there could be some asynchronous capture. Sometimes it may capture, sometimes it may non-capture also. But definitely, though there are no side effects seen as of now, because IVL is very new therapy, but yes, whenever you see certain spikes in the ECG, there could be a concern that these spikes can fall on R1T and it can cause arrhythmias, though arrhythmias have not been reported with this therapy. But yes, you definitely see these spikes, and sometimes it can capture, and it does not depend upon which vessel you are doing IVL. It can happen with LED, and it also does not depend how many IVL pulses you have given. It can happen with first cycle, or it can happen with second cycle, but these spikes can happen while giving IVL. So you should be cautious, and it can cause little transformation of the aortic waveform also. So that is one new thing I saw while giving this IVL. So the IVL is a new plate modifying devices, and unlike other devices which rely on tissue compression or debulking, this allows very tiny freckles, which is unfocused circumferential pulsatile mechanical energy, to safely disrupt the calcium with almost nil with almost very negligible complications. We also had one calcium lesion where we did first cycle and the balloon actually burst. So there was an IVL balloon burst even at the first. So this was a very interesting patient where we had dilated with NC balloon. It did not yield. We used OPN also. That also did not yield. Then we did a rotablation. That we had only 1.25 bar. We didn't have 1.5 bar, but we did a 1.25 bar. But the lesion did not yield. There was still a dog bone. There was still a napkin ring calcium. And then we used a IVL. In fact, we were not having IVL. We called the patient second time and we used the IVL. And the first cycle we gave. The second cycle, immediately that IVL balloon burst. But the good thing was that there was no complication with this IVL balloon burst. But other good thing which has happened is that the lesion actually yielded even with one cycle, and you were able to pass the NC balloon which dilated the lesion. So that was one more thing, one more incident which happened in a separate patient, that IVL balloon burst. But then it also yielded the lesion also. So it's having a high rate of success, low risk of complications. Of course, large studies and long-term clinical data are required to exactly know the safety and efficacy of this new therapy. And certain effects on cardiac conduction and vessel healing response is also required. Further studies are required for this particular IVL therapy. So this is just a schematic diagram. How do you approach? I'll not go into detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vineet, for your excellent presentation and on this new concept of IVL, which we will be discussing after our next presentation. Welcome, Dr. Devagrah Dua. Can you hear us, Dr. Dua?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So
first of all, I would like to apologize that I not for being late.
Not at all. Not at all. We are in a pandemic situation, so it's possible that we can be late for some things. Not at all. So Dr. Dua is
Should
actually,
I share my presentation, sir?
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Dr. Dua is our consultant interventional cardiologist from Mission Hospital, Durgapur. And he's been doing quite a few number of cases and some difficult interventional cases as well. So today he'll be discussing on bifurcation stenting and a few cases of it. So over to you, Dr. Dua.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the introduction. I mean, the topic has been changed as far as I'm concerned. That this is a seminar of CTO, I guess. So I had to make a presentation, and in a very short time. So can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Dua.
Okay. Can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, we can see your screen as well. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So the topic has been changed, sir. This is, first of all, I would like to say this is a case of CTO, as I was informed that this is a seminar of CTO. So I had to make a presentation which was done in a very short time. Unnecessary slides.
Sure.
I again apologize for that. So let me start. This is Dr. Devargo Dua from the Mission Hospital Durgapur presenting a case of CTO, a non-diabetic patient who was having stable ischemic heart disease of CCS class 3, which was not responding to optimal medical therapy. His echocardiogram showed there is territory, and his ejection fraction was something like 45%. So coming directly to the angiogram, you can see from this picture there is a long segment lesion in the LCX, which is significant. It has significant stenosis. From this view also epicaudal. And there was mild to intermediate plaque in the distal LAD. And there was good collateral flow to the right system from the septal arteries. And what we found is RCA is chronically totally occluded. There is a CTO in the RCA, proximal part of the RCA. With a very flow. So the patient was initially offered CABG, which was turned down by the patient himself. So he planned for PCI. Our planning was to open up the CTO first, RCA CTO first, then to address the LCA lesion. In terms of pharmacology, he was loaded with aspirin and clopidogrel, our access from the radial route. And imaging is actually very much helpful in these cases, but unfortunately we didn't have imaging facility in our lab at that time. So I'll come to the CTO PCI first of RCA. The RCA was engaged with a hockey stick catheter, guide catheter. Then we tried to open the RCA with the help of a, first we tried with a Fielder XT wire, but we were unsuccessful. Then we took run through intermediate wire with the help of a microcatheter, which is fine cross in this case. And we successfully crossed that lesion. This is the fine cross. I don't have that short of cross, but so we were able to cross it with the help of a fine cross and run through intermediate wire. Then we exchange this run through intermediate wire with a regular run through floppy wire in the distal RCA. Then we gave some serial pre-dilatation in the mid and proximal part of the RCA. And we put a stent, which was something like 2.75 into 40. We inflated the stent. Then we post-dilated the stent with a 3 into 12 NC balloon. And there was another lesion which was uncovered in the proximal RCA. The whole length of the lesion was more than 48 millimeter. So we took 2 stent strategies. So here is another stent that we took in the proximal RCA. We infected the stent. And we did post dilatation with 3.5 into 12 NC balloon. This stent was 23 into 3 into 23. It was post dilated with 3.5 into 8 balloon. And here is our final result, which so this is not a very complicated case. This is a simple case of CTO RCA. Then we tried to address the LCX. So first of all, we thought it's a very simple lesion, so we could introduce a wire very easily, but we failed repeated times. Then we took a microcatheter and we took a Fielder FC. Then we tried with a Whisper LS. Then we tried with a Sion Blue, but every time we failed because of this tortuous lesion in the tortuous course of the artery of the proximal LCX and loop or bend, which was making our day very difficult to cross. So this looked to us as a very simple lesion, so we could easily negotiate the wire. But despite using 3 or 4 wire, even we tried with a Sion Blue and then with a contact wire, but we were unsuccessful. Then lastly, in our desperation, we took the cross with the help of this fine cross. And we somehow entered the OM branch. LCX, distal LCX. Then we exchange this wire with a regular run-through wire with the help of the fine cross, and we took a distal shot through the fine cross that it's inside the lumen. So this was the run-through wire. Then we pre-dilated the lesion very well, and this was the lesion. I mean, the total length of the lesion is here also more than 48 millimeters. So we took 2 stents. We took a very long stent of 44 millimeter, 2.75 in the distal LCX. And we took another stent in the proximal LCX. It was a 3 into 3 times expedition stent. Then we post-dilated the stents. And lastly, we did a 3.5 into 12 NC balloon post-dilatation of the proximal stent. So this was our final result, which looked satisfactory. Actually, my aim was to evoke discussion about this case, which I found very difficult to cross the wire through the tortuous of the artery, and this is what I did, but I don't know whether I did the right thing or not. So this case is open to discussion, and I'll be happy.
Okay, Dr. Dua, for your excellent case. I think we've come to the end of our presentations because I believe Dr. Matia will not be joining us. So can I just start with one of the questions which has come from the audience, and we are really privileged to have Dr. Satyajit Bose, who is a colleague of mine and senior cardiac surgeon. It's actually a privilege because in a complex PCI meeting, when the cardiac surgeons participate, we feel very grateful. And it's a complete discussion then. So Dr. Bose's question was, what kind of modality of imaging should we have in the cath lab? Should it be IVUS? Should it be OCT? Or should it have a FFR? So I can start with my kind of comment, and then I can pass it on to our other colleagues of mine. I believe that FFR is a physiological thing, kind of a measurement which should be there in every lab. I mean, that's a separate thing. It's not imaging. So that I think should be available in the labs to detect, to determine the ischemic threshold for these lesions. And in terms of IVUS versus OCT, I always believed in the coronary imaging through a OCT because I myself was involved in the initial years in 1990s in the angioscopy program when it started in the globe. So the OCT has got definitely some advantages of the resolution. There are few disadvantages, of course, but I think if you ask me to have either one, either IVUS or OCT, I would definitely favor OCT in the lab because in the coming years, with the integration of the OCT with the angiogram panels, I think this is going to have a lot more horizon in the field of interventional cardiology. I would like to take opinion of my other speakers. What would they think? Particularly Dr. Nadeem Afroz. What do you think? Dr. Nadeem?
Shall I?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, sir. As you told, sir, I think FFR is a must in any cath lab because it tells you about the physiological significance. OCT and IVUS are the imaging studies. So for non-left main lesions, for knowing how much significance is this lesion is, I think FFR or maybe a RFR. Now, good thing is that with this OCT, we have this RFR also. We have a RFR in our with the same wire, we can check the RFR and FFR. That's St. Jude's only, the same about people. For a non-left main lesion, FFR is definitely a must. For a left main lesion, for knowing the importance, you can do a coronary imaging. So you can do a OCT, you can do a IVUS to know what is the significance of this lesion by doing a imaging. But for a non-left main lesions, I think for the importance of whether this is a physiological significant, FFR or RFR is must. So as you told, RFR and FFR are must in any cath lab for knowing the physiological significance. And in imaging, OCT is always better because the resolution is almost 10 times as compared to IVUS.
Dr. Ratish, your comment, please.
Okay.
I think we'll go on with the comment of what kind of imaging should you have in a lab.
Okay. As rightly told, sir, FFR is a physiological thing, and definitely it is required because in between a procedure, when we have a doubtful lesion, borderline lesion like 50 to 60, always we need to, we can't go and do a TMT or a stress thallium in between. So in between a procedure, we definitely need an FFR, which many cases, a TVD becomes a single vessel disease. So we can avoid a CABG. So like that, it's very important. Sometimes even a double vessel, maybe a triple vessel, like if it is just 40-50% lesion, may be significant if it is supplying a large area. So definitely an FFR is mandatory in all labs if possible. Out of all the modalities among physiology and imaging, FFR is a must. And regarding the imaging, yes, I also agree with you because the resolution and there are other parameters except maybe the ostial LMCS stenting or intervention where probably IVUS has an upper hand. Rest all the parameters can be clearly assessed by OCT because of the clarity and other many features which are there, especially in stent failures and other things where the IVUS may not be able to see everything. So OCT will pick up most of the cases. So I think out of this two, probably OCT will have an upper hand because LMCA ostial lesions are not very common, and so that we can manage somehow. Even and another thing against OCT is the contrast load. But when you consider that, if you take an OCT run, it will avoid so many angiographic runs. For a lesion to know the eccentricity and things like that, we need to have multiple runs of angio. We take so many views. So if you have an OCT, we don't need so many views. With one run of maybe about 10 ml dye, we can have multiple views. So we don't need multiple angiographic views. So that way we don't need too much of contrast. We can have very less contrast if you really use it in the correct format. And maybe with saline OCT and all coming up, maybe the contrast thing can come down in the days to come.
So let me ask my colleague, Dr. Dasgupta, as to what we are actually having both the modalities. We have the IVUS in our lab, and the OCT, I think we take it as and when required. So what do you find, Dr. Dasgupta, is very useful if you had to have one of them in your lab?
Yes, sir. So first I'll speak about the IVUS. Recently, I was sorry, FFR data. So recently I was going through some presentations. So there they have told that if you do anatomical, I mean on angiographic, 27% of the patient they become who are angiographically triple vessel disease. If you do FFR, it becomes around 9% of them, they are actually triple vessel disease. So that's where the means assessment of FFR is so important. So, so that's why FFR is must, even if it's, so if you are thinking it's a triple vessel disease, at the end of the day, it is actually significant single vessel disease. So you can avoid multiple stenting, or even you can avoid CABG in that case. And now coming, yes, sir.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
So, and coming to your OCT and IVUS, both have their roles in coronary imaging. Imaging is must, most of the cases, especially in complex cases. So, the experience with OCT, when you are doing a bifurcation, when you are doing a calcified lesions, OCT is must. When you are assessing a primary, when doing a primary lesion, so thrombus, or whether it is dissection or disruption of the plug, that is important. That gives OCT gives you more informations. But when you are doing assessing the vessel size, so especially in case of ostial LAD, left main, OCT may IVUS is better at present, I think, as compared to the OCT. So both have a role. There is no competitions. What I think between OCT and IVUS, both have their role in imaging. It's absolutely, it's a, both have their roles. So that is what I have understood in imaging.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dasgupta. Dr. Pandya, what about you? Your opinion, please.
I totally agree with you, sir. Regarding FFR, it is most. And regarding other images, I think for LMCA, IVUS is better. And then depend upon the which modality you are recommended to. That is most important, because final decision has to be yours, not the operators or means any other persons. So whichever modality you are recommended to, that should be used. If you are happy with IVUS and you are through with that, then that is okay. Otherwise, OCT is also better.
I think if my panelist agrees that IVUS actually has come kind of has plateaued, in the technology terms. But OCT, we are just evolving now. From, I think it's probably we are kind of 30%, 40% of the way in the OCT. So we'll have a kind of a long way to go in the OCT. And when the OCT fully evolves, I think it's going to be one of the fantastic imaging technologies, because to see intraluminal pathology, I think it's one of the best areas to know. And with the 3D reconstruction, which is done with the OCT, it's like, traveling inside a coronary artery with a camera. So I think the finer details, the resolution things, I think the OCT has got a far superior edge, except as Dr. Ratish mentioned, the left main ostium, osteo left main, and the other one would be to see the wall pathology, basically. So that's where I think the IVUS kind of scores a better point. But I think IVUS has come kind of a plateaued sequence, where they have reached. And I think OCT has a long way to travel. So I think if any lab, they get used to the OCT things now, and the interventional cardiologists, I think in the years to come, that's going to be one of the areas. And with the integration of the FFR and the OCT, it's going to be actually one catheter at the end of the day, and the integration with the angiogram. So all the three modalities can be done with one catheter. So that would be one of the important things. And as Dr. Dasgupta mentioned, I think imaging is going to be there as a companion and as an absolute necessary adjunct, and not a luxury anymore when you are doing particularly left main lesions, bifurcation lesions. I think if somebody does not do imaging, there has to be reasons why he did not. So that's one of the areas. What about Dr. Dua? What do you think? Dr. Dua, you are muted.
Absolutely agree with you that definitely we should have FFR in our lab always to assess the significance, I mean physiological significance of the lesion. And sometimes it helps in making decisions like whether we should go for grafting in a separate phase case of an LAD-D1 lesion. Even the D1 may look as non-significant angiography image, but if you can use this FFR and we see that there is a significance, physiological significance in the D1 lesion, then we can put a graft or we can stent the D1 as well. And in terms of anatomic visualization, for the clarity purpose, for image quality or resolution, it is far superior to IVUS. Only in some LMCA cases like Ostel LMCA, and there is a good data coming in LMCA angioplasty, and they are using 7F catheter with repeated saline flush OCT image in the left main also, and they are using OCT routinely in case of LMCA plasty than with IVUS. So I think the age which is in which we are living, OCT is.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can continue with our discussion of the cases. Maybe we can start off with you, Dr. Dua. So the CTO which you thought in the RCA, that seemed much more easier to negotiate compared to the LCX lesion, which was very tortuous. So would you consider doing a CT angiogram for every CTO cases if it is a planned procedure?
Sir, in this case, there was good collateral flow from the left system, and the distal vessel was good, well visualized through the collateral flow. So we didn't go for a CT angiogram. When the distal vessel is not visualized that well, for CT angiogram for better visualization.
And the wire which you used for the RCA lesion was a run-through intermediate, you mentioned.
Yes, sir, run-through intermediate. We first tried.
Okay, so for you,
that
I thought you did the case very quickly. The RCA case didn't take much time, I believe.
Yes, sir. It didn't take much time to cross the CTO.
I think the LCX case, I think you did it very well at the end. It was a very difficult case to begin with. So I think you did it very well. And I think the option of putting a CABG patient to a CABG for a non-LAD lesion is actually not a reality anymore. So I think you took the right decision in attempting the PCI to begin with and to do the CTO case first and then the LCX case. If I have to go to our next presenter, so any questions, Dr.
Question, sir, you saw the LCX?
Yeah.
Sir, can you hear me? Sir,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask one question. Sir, you saw the LCX lesion, the tortuous course of the proximal LCX, and there is a hairpin type loop in the proximal LCX. What was your thought? What where you wanted to use in this tortuous lesions? I tried with a Fielder FC first, then with this thing Sion Blue, then with the Tran track, but I was not able to cross the lesion.
Well, ultimately you went.
The wire was not taking the shape of the tortuous lesion, so we went with an approach of negotiating a CTO lesion. So we took a CrossFit 200 wire. So I think.
Because I think
I was happy, but what was your text?
Yeah, I think if you need to do a CTO, I think you have to upgrade the wire gradually. You cannot just go in with the stiffest wire. And there are few techniques.
Like a CTO at first. The LCX lesion.
Yeah. So there are few techniques. There are some techniques where you can do a IVUS guided CTO, and you need to use. I do not actually advocate doing CTO through radials. It is better to do it through the femoral route because you have a bigger catheter to go through. A 7 French or 8 French catheter or a wide bore catheter is a better option always, because you never know what is required and what kind of strategies you have to do. So that is to begin with. And secondly, I think if you have to do techniques, different techniques, if you have, even if you do a subintimal wiring, you can actually leave the wire there and track it, put a balloon there and open the subintimal space a little bit, and then put an IVUS catheter, and with IVUS guided, you go to the distal cap and open it, and then with a protected, you put a stiffer wire and then cross the distal cap. That would be one of the techniques actually as well. But I think in a tortuous CTO, negotiating any stiff wire is going to be a difficult proposition, definitely. So using a microcatheter, I think, is definitely one of the options which you did. That would make things definitely safer, because otherwise a perforation or a severe dissection could be one of the reasons. And you parked your wire initially in OM, I saw, and I think that was a good strategy as well. So if we go to Dr. Vineet Shankla for his case, yours was a 78-year-old Dr. Shankla.
Yes, sir.
And it was between a rota versus a IVL, which the case of discussion was there. And you used 8 pulses of IVL, and it opened up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We used all the pulses. In fact, in our lab, we have actually decreased the use of rota after this IVL. We have almost done around between 12 to 14 IVL in last few months. The reason I've already mentioned in my presentation.
Yeah. I think the question of leaving the D1 alone for a 78-year-old who was so unstable, I would actually agree with your assessment there, because I think it is important that you save the LAD and the life of the patient. That was most important. The D1 didn't look too bad at the end of the day. It was a heavily calcified lesion. I think if you had got into a double stent strategy involving the LAD and D1, it would have been much more complicated in a very unstable patient. So I think from my side, I think it was a good case which you did. I think we need to wait for some trial results of the Disrupt CAD3 trial, which has started with 384 patients in January 2019. So once the results of those cases of the trial comes, I think we'll be in a better position to talk about, because the MACE, there obviously we will see what kind of MACE they have. But I totally agree with you that the learning curve is much lesser in the IVL compared to a rota, and the disadvantages of the IVL is actually the limitations of the size right now. But for every technology, when they start off with, we have that limitation, but over time, I think this is one of the technology which is going to stay for calcific lesions, because it is very safe, because we have seen that this technology being used for disruption, lithotripsy of kidney stones, and it is electrical energy, as you mentioned, being transferred into mechanical energy, and we are not actually touching the surface. It is actually much lesser. So the only thing is that if you have to do IVL, say for a long segment of an artery, so you need to probably use 2 catheters, 2 balloons rather than 1. You can't do with 1 balloon. If you use a 2.5 for a distal vessel, you cannot use that same balloon for a 3.5 proximal vessel. So the cost factor is one of the factors which is at the moment one of the limitations. But it's a fantastic technology, I think, and your case was very well done. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Dr. Dasgupta.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So coming to your case of the ISR, it was a very well done case, and the initial stent was done in 2006.
Yes, sir.
And you did this case probably this year, is it?
Yes, sir. 1 month back.
Yeah, a month back. So would you think about an OPN balloon in this case nowadays? I mean, if you have that calcium, because we saw that calcium in the OCT.
Yes, sir. Actually, we considered either OPN or flex term, that is cutting balloon. But whatever in our lab we have seen, the results with cutting balloon is better than OPN balloon. I may be wrong, but that's what our observation is. So that's why we went for a flextome instead of OPN balloon.
Okay, I think you have shown beautifully the images of the OCT, particularly in the ISR. I think it is one of the best technologies to take because the images are so beautiful. Absolutely. And you actually definitely know the reason of the ISR.
Exactly.
Is it a fractured start, unexpanded stent, malopposition? So that is one of the beauty of the OCT in this particular ISR case.
Yes, yes.
I think, sir, imaging has a lot of role in ISR. What do you advise about imaging in ISR? I think every ISR case, if the imaging is there, should be done to know the pathology behind ISR.
Yeah, Dr. Vinit, the important thing is you have to understand why the ISR has happened. If you do not know the reason for the ISR, you cannot treat it.
Exactly.
Because you might come, and what happens is a lot of times, particularly in 2006, I'm sure we did not have any imaging at that point of time. So it was done angiographically. So there's a good possibility that the stent was undersized. So that is one of the main, also big reasons why this ISR happens. And also this stent thrombosis can happen. So a lot of issues can happen. So malapposition of the stents, stent fractures, undersizing of the stents, all these issues I think can be wonderfully explained with the OCT. So Dr. Ratish, if you can give your opinion on ISR.
Yes, just one submission regarding that. Was there any requirement of a second stent? Was like after dilatation, can we use a DEB instead of putting another stent? I mean, it's already, because he's already had ISR and again another stent. He may.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But if you go through the OCT image, so although it was not significant, but the entire vessels were diseased. So instead of using DS, we thought we'll go for another stent.
The area proximal to the stent and distal.
Proximal to the stent also. Yes.
Otherwise, ISR probably DEB is probably the first option.
Yes.
Yeah, the data on the drug-eluting balloons actually, which we have seen, it used to be kind of very prominent in the last maybe 7-8 years ago. I mean, the drug-eluting balloons. But I think with the advent of the OCT, what we have seen mostly is that the pathophysiology of the reason of the ISR. So as Dr. Dasgupta mentions, we need to actually also see the proximal and the distal side of the arteries as well. And obviously, if they are diseased significantly, then putting in another stent would be an idea. But if it is a focal stenosis within the stent, if it's ISR focal, then probably the role of DEB. But I am not a very good proponent of drug-eluting balloon. I would rather put another bigger size stent because now I have a measurement of the dia by a proper imaging modality.
Right.
Dr. Pandya, what do you think of the ISR?
Yes, sir. So I agree with you, sir. Instead of putting a DEB, I think bigger stent when we have the in-house imaging facilities available, it is a better option. But for that, we must know what is the initial anatomy and what is the lesion type. So for that, we can, according to that, we can change the maybe dose of antiplatelet also. So we can put on higher, because it was done in 2006 way back. So that time higher antiplatelets were not that much frequently used. So now we can upgrade to antiplatelet also, and we can use a larger stent. So I'm totally agree with you.
Dr. Dua, what's your opinion?
Yes, sir. I have a little bit experience of dealing with ISR, and in every case, I used a second stent instead of using a drug-eluting balloon. So to me, it is always better to put a stent than to a drug-eluting balloon.
See, I think the era when we did not use imaging routinely for putting stents and the ISR came, a lot of times we have seen that we have actually undersized the stents. Now with the imaging available, now when we are doing the angioplasties and putting the stent as per the diameter measured by the IVUS or the OCT, now if the ISR comes, I think the role of a drug-eluting balloon might be a little more, because definitely you would know that you have not undersized the stent at all. So if you have actually sized the stent properly, and if it is opposed properly, and if it is just a new intimal hyperplasia which has caused the ISR, then I think the role of a DEB is more beneficial, because after all it's a pharmacological thing, the DEB. But if you use the pharmacological thing treatment where there's a mechanical problem for the ISR, I think it probably will not work. So in the coming years, if your stent sizing is appropriate, the apposition is fine, and they are guided by imaging modality, I think the role of DEB might actually come into prominence more if it's a focal stenosis. Dr. Ratish, do you agree with this?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. That's you're right. With current kind of imaging, we know the size is okay. Then probably the role of second stenting is not there. But my only worry is, like, if you have a underexpanded stent previously, and there is ISR there, and if you can you reach up to that dimension, full dimension? Can you expand that previously deployed stent with this new stent? And that is what, because this case, I think repeat imaging was not done after that area was not done probably. So. I mean, that is my reservation, but ideally, yes, if you know the sizing, definitely a second stent maybe, especially if the proximal and distal areas are involved, then definitely, you need to put a stent. That's what I feel.
I think we're coming to the end of our session. So I would like to thank all the presenters who have taken time out on a Sunday and come out and presented their cases. And I'm sure that we all have learned from each other, and hopefully we will see each other physically, maybe in the months to come in some forum or other. So thank you again for your presentations and your cases and your time. So we'll say goodbye. So thank you.